Have you ever had the feeling that everything suddenly started to make sense? As if the universe were silently orchestrating every detail of your life, and everything was exactly where it should be? Unlikely coincidences, unexpected encounters, impulsive decisions that took you places you never imagined, and deep down, that feeling that none of it was by chance. Well, what you're about to discover now might surprise you. Alan Watts, the British philosopher who translated profound concepts of Eastern philosophy to the West, has a fascinating take on this. According to him, these experiences we call coincidences can be much more than mere chance. In Watts's perspective, the universe is not a blind, impersonal machine. It is a cosmic game, an elegant and mysterious game, where everything is interconnected and nothing happens in isolation. Does it sound too poetic? Maybe. But before you dismiss this idea as cheap mysticism, stop for a moment and think, how many times has something that seemed like a mistake turned out to be a success? How many times have you only understood the meaning of an event much later? That's what we're talking about. This concept, known as synchronicity, was originally formulated by Carl Jung, but took on a new tone in the words and reflections of Alan Watts. And the most incredible thing is that for him, these synchronicities are not exceptions. They are clues that we are deeply connected to everything around us. Imagine that instead of being a distant observer of the universe, you are like a wave in the ocean. Not separate, but a living extension of reality itself. This is the basis of Watts's thinking. You are not in this world by chance. It is the universe itself experiencing yourself. And when that idea starts to make sense, you start to see coincidences as parts of a much larger symphony, one that's playing all the time, even when you're not paying attention. Have you ever been through this? That moment when a random conversation gave you exactly the answer you needed? Or that day when an unexpected delay completely changed your routine and led to something amazing? Don't ignore these experiences. According to Alan Watts, they are invitations to realize that there is a deeper intelligence behind the apparent chaos. And when you begin to see the world through this lens, everything changes. And it's curious how, when we start paying attention to these small coincidences or great synchronicities, something inside us changes. It's as if a new layer of reality reveals itself. Suddenly, chance doesn't seem so accidental, encounters don't seem so random, and life gains a kind of fluidity that comes not from effort, but from surrender. Alan Watts said that when we stop trying to control everything, we finally begin to dance with life instead of fighting it. And perhaps this is the key to understanding what is really happening behind the coincidences. If anything you've heard so far made sense to you, even just a little, let me know in the comments. Seriously. Sharing your experience, your question, or even that impossible coincidence you experienced can not only enrich this conversation, but also help others going through something similar. The exchange that takes place here is not just between the speaker and the listener, it is between all of us. This space is a small community of seekers, and every story matters. And if this kind of reflection touches you in some way, if it inspires you or provokes you to see life in a different way, then subscribe to the channel. This isn't just a click, it's a clear sign that you want to continue this journey. And more than that, by liking, commenting, and subscribing, you help this content reach more people who, like you, are also searching for meaning. It may seem like a simple gesture, but it makes all the difference in ensuring this type of message continues to exist here. You never know who will be touched by an idea. Sometimes, a sentence, a video, or a story can change someone's path, and for that reason alone it's worth every second. But back to our dive. If the universe is indeed playing tricks on itself, as Watts suggests, then the next question might be, what is our role in this game? Part 2. The universe as a sign, expanding on Jung and Watts' concepts. To truly understand what lies behind these meaningful coincidences, we need to go back to the point where the concept of synchronicity was formulated in a clearer and more structured way. Carl Gustav Jung, a Swiss psychiatrist and thinker, not only coined this term, but also challenged an entire mechanistic and Cartesian view of reality by suggesting that the universe operates, at certain moments, through a symbolic and non-linear logic. Jung realized that there were certain events that could not be explained by cause and effect. These were not just rare statistical phenomena or curious coincidences, but events that, despite having no causal relationship, were deeply connected by shared meaning. It was as if the universe was speaking to the individual through symbols, offering answers and guidance through everyday reality itself. He described synchronicity as the simultaneous occurrence of two significantly related events, but without an apparent causal connection. And this is where the Western mind, accustomed to linear thinking, begins to worry. How can something be connected by meaning, but not by cause and effect? How is it possible that the objective world, the one that seems to follow fixed laws, can be intertwined with the subjective world, that of emotions, dreams, intuitions? It is exactly at this intersection that Alan Watts enters with his bold and inspiring reflections. For him, the answer lies not only in psychology, but in a complete change in the way we see reality. According to Watts, the separation between self and outside world is an illusion. A useful convention, yes, but an illusion nonetheless. But what if that's not true? What if the true nature of reality is integrative and not fragmented? What if all things, people, objects, thoughts, feelings, are dancing together in a single field of consciousness, like different movements of the same symphony? Watts liked to illustrate this with metaphors that take us off the solid ground of traditional logic and place us on more fluid but no less real terrain. He said that the universe is not working, it is joking, and this play is not something superficial or irresponsible. On the contrary, it is a profound play, a cosmic dance that contains within itself all the contradictions, all the polarities, all the aspects of existence. Think of ocean waves. They don't have a final destination. They're not traveling from point A to point B. They surge, dance, collapse, and transform back into water. The goal isn't to arrive. It's simply to exist, to vibrate, to undulate. Likewise, music doesn't exist so we can hear every last note. It exists to be felt, moment by moment, note by note. What if life, as Watts suggests, is exactly like this? Continuous flow of experiences that do not have an end in themselves. This kind of thinking may seem uncomfortable for those accustomed to goals, objectives, controls, and timelines, but it offers a rare freedom. The freedom to be present, to stop worrying about what should be happening and start paying attention to what is actually happening right now. And when we open ourselves to this new way of seeing the world, we begin to realize that coincidences that once seemed random now appear as signs, subtle invitations to delve deeper into the mystery of existence. We no longer need to understand everything with the logical mind. We can, instead, feel, trust, follow your intuition. Watts was emphatic in saying that the intuition is a different intelligence, born from a direct connection with life. It is not irrational, as many believe. It is transrational. It goes beyond reason because it operates on a deeper level. It connects us with the whole, makes us perceive hidden patterns, and guides us along paths that logic could not foresee. Part 4. The dance between chaos and order. Have you ever noticed how life seems to oscillate between moments of perfect harmony and others of complete chaos? Sometimes everything seems to be flowing wonderfully, as if the universe were conspiring in your favor. Other times, it seems like everything is falling apart at once. But what if this alternation isn't a flaw in existence but rather part of your deep intelligence? Alan Watts believed that life is not meant to be stable all the time. On the contrary, the oscillation between chaos and order is essential to creation. If everything were predictable, there would be no growth, no learning, no surprise. If everything were always disorderly, there wouldn't be enough stability for anything to develop. Life dances between these two poles, and this dance is the very fabric of reality, Imagine a melody. What makes it beautiful is not just the repetition of harmonious notes, but also the pauses, the dissonances, the unexpected changes. It's the variation that gives life to music. The same applies to existence. Sometimes we're in sync with the rhythm of the universe. Other times we seem out of step. But even these out of step have something to teach us. Watts proposes that we should not try to eliminate chaos from life, but rather learn to dance with him. This means accepting uncertainty as part of the process. It means understanding that behind the most confusing situations, there may be a greater order unfolding, even if we can't yet see it. In fact, many of the most striking synchronicities occur precisely in moments of crisis. When everything seems uncertain, we are forced to stop, listen, and pay attention. And it is in this space of openness that signs begin to emerge. Maybe you've experienced this before, a difficult time in which you were forced to change, and in the midst of this change, an unexpected conversation, a forgotten book on the shelf, a video that appeared in your feed, and suddenly, a light, an insight, a direction. Coincidence? Perhaps. But as Watts would say, coincidences are the secret language of reality, and we can only understand it when we let go of the need to control and begin to listen with our hearts. Part 6. The Nature of Reality. You are not a visitor near. One of Alan Watts' most provocative thoughts is the idea that you didn't come into the world, you left it, like a leaf leaves a tree or a wave leaves the ocean. This means you are not an intruder or a spectator on this planet. You are a direct expression of nature itself, of the totality of the cosmos. This idea radically changes the way we view our existence. In the traditional Western worldview, we often see ourselves as separate from the world, as if nature were out there, and we were here, observing and trying to understand it. But for Watts, this separation is illusory. There is no out there and an in here. Everything is interconnected. Everything is a single movement. If you look at a tree, you can see that it's part of the environment. But what about you? What you breathe comes from trees. What you eat comes from the earth. Your atoms came from stars. You are as much a part of nature as a mountain, a river, or the sky. When this becomes more than an intellectual concept, when it becomes a felt perception, something profound happens. Anxiety begins to give way to trust. The feeling of isolation transforms into belonging. And perhaps most importantly, we begin to treat the world with more care, because we recognize that it is a part of us. Watts said that the self is a process, not a thing. We are not fixed, isolated entities. We are movements in constant flux. What we call self is merely a linguistic convenience, a way of organizing experience. But in reality, there are no real boundaries between you and the rest of the universe. This perspective also transforms the way we view life's events. Because if we are not separate, then what happens to us, even difficulties, can be seen as part of a larger process in which we actively participate. We are not at the mercy of external forces, but engaged in an intimate dance with existence itself. And that's why, for Watts, synchronicities are not sporadic miracles, but reminders of our belonging. They show that reality is not testing or punishing us. It is expressing itself through us. Part 7. The Dance of Life. The balance between self and whole. Imagine for a moment that life is not a battle to be won, nor a ladder to be climbed, but rather a dance. There is no end point to the dance. It exists not to get somewhere, but to be danced. Alan Watts often used this metaphor to explain how we should live, not as someone running towards a prize, but as someone moving to the sound of invisible music. In this context, the individual self, with all its memories, desires, and fears, is like a dancer, and the universe, with its unpredictable vastness, is the constantly playing melody. The beauty of dance lies precisely in the harmony between the two. When the dancer tries to control the music, everything is lost. But when they listen, feel, and surrender, something magical happens. And here lies one of the central points of Watts's philosophy. Suffering arises, in large part, from our constant attempt to control the dance. We want to ensure the right steps, predict the next movement, avoid any mistakes. But music is not meant to be predicted. It changes, it challenges, it surprises. Life, according to Watts, is best lived with a sense of spontaneous trust. This doesn't mean living irresponsibly or without awareness. It means being so present in the now, so in touch with what's happening inside and outside of you, that right action arises naturally, without effort, without rigidity, without fear. This is what he called effortless action, or Wu Wei, a concept taken from Chinese Taoism. Wu Wei is not inactivity, but a way of acting in harmony with the flow of things, like a surfer catching the right wave at the right time, without forcing anything. Part 8. The Art of Surrender. Trusting the process of life. The idea of surrender may sound strange, especially in a world that values control, planning, and logic above all else. From a young age, we're taught to take control, set goals, anticipate risks, and keep everything under constant surveillance. Modern society has built a collective belief that the more control you have, the safer you'll be. But Alan Watts proposed something radically different and profoundly transformative. Trust. But trust what exactly? Trust no flow of life. Trust that the universe, in its complexity and mystery, knows more than our individual ego can comprehend. Trust that even if you don't see the whole path, the next step will be revealed when the time is right. Watts invites us to let go of the need to control everything. He said that trying to control life is like trying to smooth the water with your hands. The more you push, the more turbulence you create. True fluidity arises when you stop resisting. This surrender isn't synonymous with passivity or resignation. It doesn't mean standing still and waiting for everything to magically resolve itself. On the contrary, it's about acting consciously, but without attachment to the outcome. It's about doing the best you can right now, knowing that the outcome is not entirely within your control, and that's okay. Surrender is a quiet wisdom that understands that life has its own rhythms, that sometimes you need to take a step back to take 2 steps forward, that some delays are actually perfect synchronicities for something that is still being prepared for you. It's when you stop fighting the current and start sailing with it, not because you've surrendered in a negative way, but because you've realized that the river knows where it's going, and that you're part of that river. Watts believed that by surrendering to the flow of existence, you reconnect with your role in the whole. Your decisions begin to come from a deeper, more intuitive place. You stop acting based on fear or external pressure and begin to act from an internal alignment. Life becomes lighter, more spontaneous, more truthful. When you let go, the unexpected can finally happen, and what we often call a miracle is just the natural consequence of surrendering to the cosmic dance of life. Part 9. Intuition, the silent language of the whole. In a world that prioritizes logic and reason, intuition is often overlooked. It's seen as something less reliable, less scientific, something to be used only as a last resort. But Alan Watts saw intuition differently. For him, she was a direct bridge between the individual and the whole, between the little I and the vastness of the universe. Intuition is that sudden feeling of knowing, without knowing how you know. It is an internal certainty that appears without warning, without rational explanation, but that somehow makes perfect sense. It often appears as a lightness when making a decision, a feeling of butterflies in the stomach, a sudden peace in the midst of chaos. It can come as a soft whisper amid the noise of thoughts, a voice that doesn't shout but knows. According to Watts, this intuitive wisdom cannot be accessed by the logical mind because it comes from a deeper level of consciousness. It's as if the universe is constantly communicating with us, but we're so distracted by mental noise that we fail to hear it. Imagine intuition as a delicate instrument, tuned to the most subtle vibrations of existence. When you live disconnected from yourself, With excessive stress, fear, haste, judgment, this instrument goes out of tune. But when you slow down, meditate, contemplate, or simply silence, something aligns. And in this more sensitive state, you begin to notice signs, synchronicities, paths emerging where before there was only a wall. Intuition is not used to predict the future like a crystal ball. It serves to keep you aligned with the present moment. And it's in this alignment that you start making decisions that feel right, even before you know why. Have you ever had the feeling that something inside you knew? That even without any logical explanation, there was a clarity that came not from thought, but from a deeper place? This is the language of the whole speaking to you. Watts reminds us that the more we trust life, the more intuition flourishes, because it doesn't compete with the ego, it just waits for the ego to quiet down. And when that happens, you begin to live in a much more connected way, with others, with the world, with who you truly are. Part 10. Real Stories of Synchronicity. When the universe gives a sign, nothing makes synchronicity more real than when it happens to us, or to someone we know. And the funny thing is, the more you talk to people about it, the more you realize that almost everyone has experienced something like this. You may not have called it synchronicity, you may even have thought it was luck or coincidence, but deep down the feeling is the same. Something bigger was at work. Maybe it was that moment when you thought of someone, and seconds later they texted you. Or when you were unsure of a path in life and suddenly heard a phrase on TV, in a book, or from a stranger on the street that seemed to directly address your dilemma. These stories, though simple, carry enormous power, because they remind us that we are not alone. There is an intelligence at work behind the veil of things, weaving together the threads of life in a way that the rational mind cannot explain, but that the heart recognizes. I have witnessed many of these stories myself. One of them happened to a woman who was going through a very difficult time. She had lost her job, was about to be evicted, and felt like she had no way out. One day, sitting on a park bench, she began to cry. A woman she had never seen before approached her and, without saying much, offered her an envelope. Inside was enough money for a month's rent and a note that said, "You are exactly where you're supposed to be. Trust me." This woman tried to thank her, but the lady simply smiled and walked away. She never saw her again. Coincidence? Maybe. But for her, it was as if the universe had reached out at the exact moment she needed it most. Another story comes from a man who, after losing a loved one, began seeing the same blue butterfly every day in the garden where he used to talk to that person. At first he thought it was just a coincidence, but when he started talking to others and realized it wasn't common to see butterflies of that species there at that time of year, he began to interpret it as a sign, a silent reminder that the connection with those we love goes beyond life and death. These stories are not meant to prove anything. They are not scientific evidence, nor attempts to convince anyone of a belief. They are invitations to feel, to observe, to open ourselves to the possibility that life is more mysterious, rich and interconnected than we imagine. And the most beautiful thing is that these synchronicities, they don't choose special people. They happen to all of us, all the time. The question is, are we attentive? Are we willing to see beyond the obvious, to hear what is unsaid, to perceive what cannot be measured? Alan Watts invites us to look at life with more sensitive eyes, less anxious for control and more open to surprise. And when we do that, signs start popping up everywhere, not because they weren't there before, but because we learn to see. Part 11. The Paradox, Freedom Within the Flow. Perhaps one of the most fascinating and challenging parts of Alan Watts's thinking is the paradox he presents between freedom and flow. After all, if everything is interconnected, if the universe has its mysterious and synchronous ways, where is our free will? Are we really choosing, or just following a script that is already written? Watts did not see this dichotomy so rigidly. For him, it is not a question of either this or that, but of both this and that. In other words, there is flow. But within it, there is freedom. There is a melody being played, but you can improvise. We are not puppets in a divine theater, nor solitary gods creating everything from scratch. We are conscious participants of a game that is being created together with us. Life, for him, is not a fixed track, but an open stage. You are not bound by an immutable fate, but you are not entirely separate from the whole either. It's like being in a river. You didn't choose the river, nor the direction of the current, but you can swim, dive, float, resist, or surrender. Each choice has a consequence, but they are all part of the same flow. This understanding is liberating because it takes the weight off perfection. You don't have to get it right every time. You don't have to have all the answers. You need to be present, aware, connected, because the more you act from this connection, with your intuition, with your heart, with the now, the more your actions align with what the universe is proposing. And then, the real magic happens. The choices you make don't take you away from the flow but put you deeper into it. You begin to act with intention but without attachment, with strength but without rigidity, with clarity but without anxiety. Watts said that the deepest freedom is not doing whatever you want, but live in harmony with what really is, with the truth of life, with the cosmic dance that surrounds us. And perhaps that is the greatest challenge and the greatest gift. Discover that we are free, precisely because we are part of everything. Part 12. What if all this is true? Think carefully. What if everything we've discussed so far is actually true? And if the universe, in fact, is not operating like a cold machine, but as a lively, playful, profound, and purposeful intelligence? What if you are not just a spectator, but a living extension of that very universe, experiencing yourself through your life, your body, your consciousness? This hypothesis changes absolutely everything. It changes the way you wake up, how you deal with your choices, your mistakes, your relationships, and even your fears. Because if it is true, then you were never lost, never alone, never out of place. Everything that brought you here, the pain, the doubts, the ruptures, the coincidences, the unlikely encounters, was part of the dance. And not a random dance, but a mysterious and intelligent choreography, which often only makes sense when seen from above, when looked at with the heart and not with the mind. Imagine if, instead of constantly trying to fix life, you started listening to what it's trying to show you. What if, instead of controlling every step, you started observing the signs, flowing, trusting? Perhaps the big turning point is right there. Stop fighting the current and start swimming with her, not as someone who passively surrenders, but as someone who dances with life, with lightness, with attention, with presence. And if all this is true, so maybe the most difficult moments of your journey were not punishments, but invitations to transformation. Maybe the people who held you back were actually protecting you from something you couldn't yet see. Perhaps the mistakes you so regret were hidden shortcuts, paths that taught you what no success would have taught you. If it is true that you are part of the whole, then there is no real separation between you and the universe. What you feel, vibrate, believe, create, and share, all of it interacts with reality, like waves spreading across a calm lake. And more, these waves return, always, sometimes as blessings, sometimes as challenges, but always as invitations to grow, to wake up, to remember. Philosopher Alan Watts offers us a profoundly liberating lens through which to view life. He doesn't want to convince you of a new doctrine. He doesn't want you to adopt a new belief system. The invitation is simpler and more radical. Look at life with the eyes of a child, with eyes of curiosity, openness, and wonder. Because deep down, the truth may not be something you learn, but something you remember. And when you start to remember, even without knowing where, a feeling begins to emerge. A feeling that you are in the right place at the right time, of which everything is part, of which you, without adding or taking away, it's life itself happening. And if it is indeed true, if this cosmic dance is happening right now, as you breathe, think, feel, then perhaps the greatest wisdom lies in relearn to listen to the rhythm of life, not the frenetic pace we're taught to follow, made of goals, haste, and demands, but the silent, almost imperceptible pace that comes from within and that aligns with what happens outside, effortlessly. Maybe it's time to slow down a bit, to observe more, to trust more. Stop asking yourself why all the time and start feeling what for all this is revealing itself on your path. And it may seem small, but even this moment, the fact that you are here, now, listening to all of this, may be part of one of these synchronicities. Maybe you clicked on this video by accident, or maybe it wasn't by chance. If this message touched some part of you, if it reminded you of something you already felt but didn't know how to put into words, then I invite you to continue this journey with me. Subscribe to the channel, not only because it helps this content reach other people, which it does a lot, but because this signals to yourself that you are ready to see life with different eyes, with more presence, more lightness, more connection. After all, if the universe really is a great subtle game of meanings, perhaps the simple act of opening oneself to new ideas is the first step for new synchronicities to begin to emerge. And who knows, the next sign may be closer than you think.